So catalyzing change, the crucial role of public-private collaboration in advancing ESG goals. Fun fact, somebody that can really speak about the public and private is Dr. Darian. She was the first chief sustainability officer in a central bank or regulator in the world. In the world. So we're very excited, and over to you.
Hello. Oh, now it's working. Come on in, everybody. The water's fine. Talking more about ESG. Come in, grab a seat. Lots of seats available at the front of the room. Please, fellow panelists, come and have a seat. Settle in, because you guys have got me for at least the next hour, because I have 2 panels to run. Okay, so I am Darian McBain. I'm the CEO of Outsourced Chief Sustainability Officer, and today we are going to talk about collaboration and partnerships for ESG. And I will ask my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. Vaida?
Hello, I'm Vaida Markevičienė. I'm Vice Minister of Finance back in Lithuania. I'm responsible for investment portfolio and also financial markets. And part of the financial markets is fintech, of course, and the green finance. So I'll be glad to share our insights with you today.
Wonderful, thank you and welcome. John.
Hi, and hi everyone. Yeah, please come in, don't be shy. I'm John McCalla-Leacy. I work at KPMG, I'm a partner there. I'm also the head of ESG for KPMG globally, and one of the vice chairmen in the UK. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to share a little bit of perhaps a global perspective and some of what we're seeing and hearing from our clients. So delighted to be here.
Awesome, thank you. A very esteemed panel indeed. So I thought we would start by talking about the trends that you are both seeing in ESG. So obviously, neither of you live in Singapore. You're here today at the FinTech Festival. Lithuania, I think you're based in the UK, but you both work very much in global roles. So maybe, John, picking up from what you said, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in ESG at the moment?
Yeah, no, happy to start. So maybe I'll start, as you say, global trends. I'll touch a little bit on the UK, where I'm from, and also in the EU. So first of all, what I'd say is context is incredibly important. Next year, 2024, we'll see, I think it's about 70 elections around the world. And that includes in the US, in the UK, the European Parliament, actually I believe in Lithuania also, as well as elsewhere in the world. Now, why is that important, and why does that frame a context? A couple of reasons. First of all, what we're seeing is, to some degrees, the politicization of certain topics around ESG, probably most acute, more so in the US, but also we see this in the UK. So what do I mean by that? We're seeing that in some areas, there's either hardening or an acceleration, should we say, of some of the plans with respect to ESG, primarily on the left. The Democrats, Labour, seeking to spend more, to invest more. The US with its flagship program, it's called the Inflation Reduction Act. They're looking to spend about $369 billion of incentives. But on the right, what you see, certainly in the US and the UK, is perhaps a slowing down, should we say, on some of the medium and the short-term commitments. And we're seeing this playing through a very politicized way, which in the short term, some of our clients are saying, well, you know, what is going to happen, as it were. EU, thankfully, much more steady in this. I think we're 40, if I do the maths right, 47 days, there you go. We're 47 days before the window opens for CSRDs, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. The disclosure requirement starts on 1st January. And the EU are much clearer in terms of their commitment and moving forwards with disclosure, not just with the CSRD, but also broader topics from an ESG perspective, things like supply chain diligence and so on. So what we're seeing is overall, as I said, some politicization as it were, primarily driven out of the US, to some degree in the UK also. EU pretty steady in that, but most of this, as we're seeing, is short to medium term, and our clients and corporates are really actually businesses are getting on with it. They are getting on with it. They know that change is coming. Just one brief data point, WBCSD, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, it's been around for about 30 years. The membership of the WBCSD now is bigger than it has ever been at any point in its history. So you're getting some politics here, but businesses really getting on it and driving change.
Okay, some great data points there. 47 days until CSRD reporting comes in. I'm going to be marking that off on my calendar for the next few days.
Please do.
Kind of scary. Okay, so that's the private sector. Obviously, Vaida, you're working for the government. What are some of the trends that you're seeing?
So I think the trends are still the same. So there is no surprise we have ESG stage here. So I think now there is this broad consensus that ESG is important. And in the EU, another trend is regulation. As you said, you are looking forward, counting the days down, because what we have in the EU, we have already taxonomy, which says what is green and what is not, and that harmonization and common understanding is of paramount importance. Another kind of harmonized directive is about reporting in the financial sector. So who, what, and how needs to report their financial data about sustainability, and also for corporates now they will have to disclose this data. And I think this is the starting point. When we have standards, when we agree on the common standards, when we have data available, we can, build on that. Because what it gives us, it gives transparency, it gives clarity, and it allows then to scrutinize the data for everyone and make decisions based on that. Because when we talk about the ESG, I think one of the main risks is greenwashing, because it makes, then investors lose trust, people lose trust. So by having data available, we can avoid that issue. Another thing that can happen is that with, available data, we can have new business models erupting, and we can use technology to crunch that data and, find different sorts of solutions. We just, talked backstage about all the opportunities that then availability of data and technology opens up. And I would say the last trend, at least in the EU, is the taxation. What we don't want to have is a sort of race to the bottom. Who sets, the lowest with high standards, who set the lowest ones. So carbon border adjustment tax in the EU would force the companies to meet the high standards, and they won't distort the market. I would say that it would ensure the level playing field for the companies.
So who here is looking at the EU regulations that are forthcoming, maybe with a bit of trepidation? Anyone? I work a lot in the real economy, carbon border adjustment mechanisms, human rights due diligence, deforestation. These are all coming to a country near you. So start to look out. What the EU is doing with their regulation will have an impact on Asia. And so I think that's a time to pivot, maybe to ask you both about what are the different trends that you might be seeing in Asia? Obviously, we're here at the Singapore FinTech Festival. We've got a lot of regional representation. Do you see any differences in the discussions of what's happening in the EU to what you're hearing in Asia? Vaida, if we start with you.
I would say there are, more similarities than differences. And I would say that, that comes also from the consumer side. If we look at different generations, so Gen Z is way more into, ESG than the previous generations. And I think companies do understand that younger generation, they are way more conscious and way more interested, and they want to choose, brands that reflect their value. So there is this, push for the consumer that then makes, also then the regulators act. So I would say, there is similarities in that way, but I wouldn't say it's a difference. Probably it's also similar everywhere. But when we talk about the ESG, and also I was mentioning, the trends, and you were talking about the trends, and about directives that are coming. But actually, the focus now everywhere is on E part of ESG, and on the environmental part, there is way more clarity and kind of consensus. While I would say that the rest, S and G, they still have to be developed, and we have to find, common standards on those aspects.
Some great points there. And I think really interesting about how the consumers, to an extent, and the generational change is a great leveler in the discussions. John, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I would echo the similarities. I'd probably focus primarily that similarities certainly between the EU and Asia region. And the reason why I carve out the EU, the EU is really quite forward-thinking in this regard. Touched a little bit on a regulation, but that change is flowing through. Because of the polarization in the US, that they are not as forward-thinking, I would say now, but they will come on board. They will come on board. A couple of things I would say is it's been an absolute delight to be here and to see so much innovation. And I'll, point, we probably just over there is a stand
all that innovation over there.
Over there.
Those innovation stands.
Called Greenprint, and which is helping SMEs to gather their ESG sustainability-related data and to drive decarbonisation plans. That, in terms of what I've seen globally, is probably market leading. Here in Singapore, the fact that the SGX has mandated that directors of large companies need to take training, mandated training, that is pretty much market leading. I was at Hong Kong MA, the Hong Kong Market Authority, not so long ago, and they are just about to roll out in a couple of weeks' time a physical, climate physical risk tool, which they will give to about 200 banks for free. Again, Asia, a lot of similarities, certainly to the EU in terms of moving things forwards. I'll just pick up one thing briefly, what you talked about in terms of reporting and the focus on ES. I don't know how many ESG practitioners are here, but have you heard of TCFD here? Yeah, okay, great. Have you heard of TNFD? Slightly fewer hands.
Less hands.
Right, have you heard of TISFD? Nobody. Okay, so I'll explain. TCFD, climate-related financial disclosures. TNFD, nature-related financial disclosures. TISFD is Task Force for Inequality and Social related financial disclosures. The reason why you haven't heard of it very much is that a lot of the work's been going on in the background. Today, I will be at COP28 in the Middle East. Maybe some of you will be there. Hopefully I get to see you. But I believe that there will be an announcement around TISFD at COP, and then with a view to this being integrated into the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Boards. And the whole idea there is that companies move towards integrated reporting that considers not only climate, not only nature, but also the social aspects. So that's one of the key developments here. So you heard it here first. So you can go away and talk about TISFD when you leave from here.
Exactly what we need. Hot off the press. We needed a 5-letter acronym. There's too many that are 3 and 4, so glad we're breaking out into the 5s. Now, we're here to talk about partnerships and collaboration. We know that SDG 17 is Partnership for the Goals, for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's a whole goal dedicated to partnership and collaboration. Why is it so important for sustainability? Vaida.
I don't know how many of you here are from the government, but, back at home, sometimes we say that, all the easy problems that one person can solve at its, computer, they are already solved, in the previous governments. Now we only have challenges that can be solved. They have multi-layer, they have, very complex challenges that can only be solved with the partnerships. And when we talk about, the ESG, the climate change, that, that is the only way to go. There is no, there is no other way to solve it than through partnership. Why is that? From the regulatory side, and from business side, we have different abilities, we have different skills, and, different roles that we can combine. From a regulatory perspective, what I think is important is this kind of harmonization and setting the rules of the game. And when these rules of the game are set by, on the policy level by the governments, they are more scrutinized and there is more transparency and accountability. When the business step in, they can offer technological solutions and they can say what is practical, doable, and efficient. And I can share like a very practical example. Around a year ago, there was this, huge, I would say, scandal with Vera carbon offsets. Then, scientists proved that 2 billion rainforest carbon offset market that was used by large corporates such as Shell, Gucci, Disney, that it was actually counterproductive. It was not kind of even neutral on the environment, it was harming the environment. And big corporates were ready to put their money into that. And that standard was run by non-profit, and of course they didn't have any bad intentions, but there were no kind of standard rules. They had less scrutiny, and when the governments do any of these standards, they always, they have way more attention. They have to disclose their data. They have to justify each step they are making. And I think that adds to, transparency and quality and reliability then for the consumers.
Yeah, a good example of where government and the private sector and the not-for-profit sector should have been collaborating from long ago. John, what do you think? Why do we need collaboration?
I absolutely agree. We need collaboration fundamentally because what I see, global issues require global solutions. We're in Singapore right now, huge financial services district. Financial services spans geography, so no one geography, no one country can do this alone. But then also in terms of having the skill set, the experience, the knowledge, the know-how, again, it doesn't exist in any one place. Yes, we need government to drive policy at a national level, but we need to implement through local government at a local level. We need to innovate, we need engineers, we need tech people, and we also need capital. Whether the capital, seed capital, comes from multinational development banks, but then we need the broader capital to drive this transformation to a low-carbon economy. So unless we can connect all these things and work together, there will be no transition. So we absolutely need each other to do this. And there are many, many, many examples of where government and corporates working together. One that comes to mind immediately is the First Movers Coalition. I think it's about 85 corporates, 12 governments from around the world looking to focus on new clean tech, new innovations in the area of things such as cement manufacture, aviations, and so on. So that is just one example of the many, many coalitions out there, and we need more.
Now I'm going to ask you both to give me one of your best examples of a public-private collaboration to advance ESG. While I give you some thinking time, bit of audience participation, hands up. Who here works for a government? Oh, one happy person willing to identify. Who works for a financial institution? Yeah, a bit more. Who is in a startup or technology? A few more hands. Anyone works for the not-for-profit sector? Who just professionally goes to conferences because it's a good place to hang out? Yeah, okay. All right. So we've got a bit of a smattering. People who are from all different parts of the economy, really. So what's an example that you can give of where you really think public-private sectors have come together to advance ESG?
I can share what we do in Lithuania. So just recently, we made a Green Finance Action Plan that is part of our broader green agenda, and we did it together with the market. Because in the European Union, in Lithuania, we see that even though as a government we put massive funds into the kind of greening of the economy, it's not enough, and we need to attract private capital as well. And the best way to do it is through having like this common understanding of what it is, and having data available and knowledge available. So what we did as part of that Green Finance Action Plan, we established Green Finance Institute that acts as a kind of think tank, as a knowledge hub between the private sector and the public sector. And their role is also to establish then a database that is available for, it's publicly available. And in that database, we plan to have really granular data from our companies, also SMEs, because for now, financing is available green. It doesn't have to be, green, or you don't have to have proof that you're green to access to finance, but eventually it may happen. So what we don't want, our small and medium-sized enterprises to kind of drop out of the market just because not because they are, brown, but they can't prove who they are. So that, database would enable finance participants from financial sector, to be able to see it and assess it. This availability of granular data would, open up for academia to do, give insights for businesses, for policymakers, and of course for the government, for making the policy. It would enable to make informed decisions and targeted decisions. So, our Green Finance Institute, this kind of like a linking goal between private and public sector, would then, facilitate private investments flowing into greening of the economy together with public funds. Because I think that only that way we can make an impact. So, everyone has the role to play, and I think we can only reach our environmental goals, our ESG goals, when each individual start, to act in a conscious way. If we don't make it together, we don't make it. So we have to team up.
That's true. It's in all of our own self-interest. Academia, of course, very important group. Did I miss out any academics sitting here in the room? At least two. Good. A few. Excellent. Academics, it was a really good point to bring up that you need that convening power that academia can bring, as well as the research and the power that goes behind that. John, now I'm going to ask you, let me just say, audience, after John, I'm going to come to the audience for questions, so start thinking about what you'd like to ask our panelists. Over to you.
Yeah, I've got a really exciting example I'm going to share quite quickly, and similar to, give you a heads up on TISFD. You wouldn't have heard of this before. You've heard of it now. I'm giving you a heads up now on Bristol Leap. And if you've got some time, Google Bristol Leap later on. Again, this will be announced at COP. Bristol is one of the largest cities in the UK, and the mayor of Bristol is a chap called Marvin Rees. He will travel to COP, and he's going to make an announcement. And this is what he's done. If you look at COP27 last year, the UN had a list of something like, I think it's $120 billion of investable projects, which they pushed out. Since then, there's a group called 3CI have pulled together a mechanism to gather projects. They now have a list of $330 billion of projects in the UK alone. Okay, in the UK alone. Let's hold this in mind. You kind of think, why am I talking about the UK? I'll come back to it. So you've got a list of investable projects. What Bristol Leap is, and is certainly the first time this ever happened in the UK, I believe it's one of the first times it's happened anywhere globally, is that they've pulled together a model of public-private partnership. The mayor needed to drive pretty significant transformational change to put in brand new energy infrastructure, to invest in energy efficiency of some of the buildings within Bristol and so on. And what they've done is they've pulled together a whole process and a set of RFPs and so on. This is how you tender for this. This is how you do it. This is how you put some seed capital in this from a local council perspective, and this is how you attract private finance. They have managed to attract $500 million of finance, and also We've managed to create just over 1,000 new jobs within Bristol. Now, the reason why I mention both of these is that they will present this and they will gift it to cities all around the world from COP. So the whole idea is, as I said, this is how we've done this. This is how public and private are working together, and they will gift it and say, you know, go ahead and let's try and scale this and replicate this. So I think it's really exciting.
That is exciting. When I think of, I used to work in the NHS for the Purchasing and Supply Agency, and how you do purchasing and supply is often still a little bit behind in practice. So it is exciting. Next time I'm on a panel with you, John, I'm going to make sure I take notes because you're giving all of these new ideas. Now, question time. Who has a question for our panelists? Something to do with collaboration. Have we got a roving mic? The lady in the check jacket at 3/4 of the way back, I saw her hand first.
Hi, thanks for the discussion. This is Radhika. I think collaboration is all great, and that's the ideal end objective. In my professional capacity, I engage both corporates and government agencies on their ESG goals. So how much do you think this collaboration would be voluntary, and how much would be that carrot and stick approach, regulatory requirements around reporting, and hence you have to collaborate? Thank you.
Shall I start? Hi, Radhika. It's all of the above. It's a combination of very much EU, much more of a carrot approach, US, much more an incentives approach through the Inflation Reduction Act. But the reason why I mentioned WBCSD is that is 100% collaborative, and this is voluntary, sorry, 100% voluntary, which is coming through the WBCSD. But when I reference also TISFD, that is going through the WBCSD, so many acronyms, on a voluntary basis right now with a view to actually mandating that through reporting. I think one of the key things you look at is the Eldema's Trust Barometer, which I'm sure many of you have seen this, which the 2023 barometer shows clearly that businesses are most trusted to drive this change. So yes, businesses are responding to regulations, but they're also responding to the fact that their stakeholders demand this change. I talk a lot about the internal activist, which is effectively their own staff. So at KPMG, our average age of employees is about 20, I think it's 26 and a half. So they're relatively young, and they are demanding change, as well as investors and so on and so forth. So it is all a combination. And what I tend to say is when we speak to our clients, we meet them where they're at, and we typically find them in one of three places. They either have a compliance mindset, which is tell me what I must do. They could have a strategic mindset, which is tell me what I could do, or they have an altruistic mindset, which is tell me what I should do. And altruism is really around a deep sense of wanting to do something which will last beyond their companies and so on. So all of the above, and which I think is exactly right, as long as we push forward and make this change happen quickly.
Vaida, any thoughts on this?
I think I can just add to that, with all the new things, this kind of adaptation curve. So, of course, initially the governments have to say a push. If, for example, it won't come as a policy that we need to pursue ESG, I think we would have gotten there, but probably in centuries later. Because even now, the goals are very ambitious, they are hard to achieve. So without this sort of push, it wouldn't happen at all. But when we already have, the push, and, then the ball is already rolling, and we have, consumers that are changing their attitudes. We have, as you said, internal, advocacy. So people, when they choose jobs, they're thinking also about the purpose, about the company. If you want to attract, best talent, you have to act in a responsible way. So I think, eventually, carrots and sticks, they will be given by the consumers and by the talents. So those who want to, to kind of be in the race, we will have to adapt, and there won't be a need for the government to kind of push every single step.
Good news, bad news time. Bad news is our next panelist is running a little bit late. Good news is we have more time for questions. So, hands up, who has another question? That was a lot of enthusiasm, I like that. The gentleman in the middle here.
Hi, my name is Prakash. Quick question on the crucial role for public-private collaboration. How do you see it evolving? Is it public with policies pushed down to private for working together? Or does the push come from the private side and then the government is working on policies?
You know, I think it goes both ways. And for example, back at home in Lithuania, we have this same kind of situation with fintech. We started in 2016. It was like the initial push by the government. Today, Lithuania is the #1 in terms of like licensed entities in all the EU, because, you know, from having Lithuanian license, companies can operate in all of the union. And we are, you know, still staying up there because we do everything together with the market. We just recently launched our new strategy that was drafted by the institutions and the market. Was it difficult? Yes, it took a long time because we had to calibrate our interests. But, you know, the interest goes from both ways. So we have certain kind of requests from the market, but then the market has requests to us as the policymakers as well. And, you know, it always goes both ways. So what I think is important is to have, you know, the ultimate goal. So the purpose. It's not about kind of pursuing some narrow interests of you know, some companies or some politicians. When we talk about the ESG, we really have kind of higher goals that we want to achieve. And then you have to have, you know, open dialogue. And for that, you need trust. And open dialogue won't just happen like if you call someone, you know, once a year or, you know, twice a year and say, okay, let's talk openly. You know, it wouldn't happen. It's a bit like a relationship. You know, you have to kind of constantly work on that openness and trust. And then, of course, we are doing something new here. It's not tested. So, you know, the course of action that we may choose, it may not work. We have to be flexible about it. So as long as all, you know, the parties involved understand that, the collaboration can work and can be beneficial for all of the sides. So what we say, we have to have an ecosystem in which all the participants, they know each other, they trust each other, and they share their knowledge. Only that way we can move forward. And then it's not just, you know, I ask something, you ask something, I push you for something, you push me for something. It's not about that. It's by kind of building something better by doing it together.
Okay, so a bit of push and pull. Now, was there a question over here at the front, Ms. Orr?
Thanks. My name is Janet, and I spent a long time in the public sector at the UN, and now I'm in a startup and in academia, so I'm sort of more on the private sector side. And so I wanted to follow up on Prakash's question. When I was in the public role, there was a lot of fear about pushing the private sector to act. And now I'm in the private sector role looking at ESG disclosures. And companies are really looking at what they are required to do. And as in India, in Singapore, in Australia, and then I think in Europe you'll have a lot more experience. But there really just seems to be such a lag of public action for things that have been possible in the private sector for a long time. And I'm wondering, to what extent do you take into account, okay, it's possible for companies to disclose ESG of their supply chains. We know that by our wonderful consultations with academia. So we need to go ahead and have some ambitious policy in that and trust that that the private sector will follow, but it's still lagging quite far behind, I think, what's been possible for a while. And as a result, now I'm seeing it's really hard to work in this space in a private sector capacity without that. And I'm just wondering how that push-pull, like, can you give some examples of where you feel like policy's been really right on the cusp, has been really ambitious and had great vision and been on the right time, and where you think it really lagged behind what was possible in hindsight?
Can I,
yeah, John,
maybe I can start? No, thank you for that. I'll start with the example. So COP26 in Glasgow, the UK had a presidency. Now Prime Minister, then Chancellor Rishi Sunak, said that by 2023, by the end of this year, the UK will be the global net zero financial services centre. And it then also mandated, policy level, that all financial services companies, all listed companies, need to have transition plans consistent with arriving at net zero by the end of this year. Okay, so that was a world first. It was a very big policy push. They also then put in place the TPT, the Transition Plan Task Force, which would effectively mark the homework of your plans. So you get a massive push there. People start, but then on the corporate side, on the business side, they say, well, what does that actually mean? To have a transition plan, what should be in the transition plan? Is it just climate focused? Is it climate nature focused? Do we need to incorporate some S aspects and so on? So there is definitely that. I'm just agreeing with you, both sides, which is you've got that corporate push, as it were, but then you also need to understand the realities for business, and let's be clear, the realities for business will be different depending on which sector you operate and which geography you operate in. Just to your point around businesses finding this difficult, what I like to do and what I like to frame, I know we're out of time, I'll do this really quickly, is that if you take a view that you're almost looking down at where you are now, and I've got to report on this, and then this, and then this, what comes next, it means if I'm head down, I will always get surprised. If I look at the horizon and say fundamentally where we get into is integrated reporting, which considers all these aspects, and it is integrated the financials with the non-financials, how do I then work backwards from that? And when I speak to clients, when they do say, hey, you know what, I've got all these disclosure requirements, well, I simply say to them, you know what, if this is a risk to your business, wouldn't you want to know? If you have a reputational risk on the S, if you've got a climate-related risk on the E, shouldn't you want to know? It's about sustainable value creation. So I'm out of time. This is flashing, but it's very much get into that integrated reporting. Be delighted to talk to you about this a bit more, and then work backwards, and then starting to prepare for that.
Okay, thank you. It seems like we could have gone on with question time for a lot longer, but sadly we are out of time. Please join me thanking Vaida and John for this interesting conversation today. Thank you.